Hey, good morning. So last Monday we were going to have the meaningful Monday call about doctors mostly. We were going to discuss some of the stories that I've heard, things that you experienced, so forth, and my possible. I don't know if I call them solutions, but ideas for dealing with some things, right? So a lot of and I was unable to be here last Monday, so I'm just going to do this quick recording and we may bring this back up again next Monday, but I didn't want to just leave you hanging completely, right? So, um, some things that I've heard, right? People come in and they say, "I know there's something wrong with my body, but they're telling me that everything is normal." Okay. Um, or they blame everything on my weight. Like there's nothing wrong with me. It's just I need to lose weight. Or they wrote a prescription before I even finished explaining what was going on, right? They told me it was anxiety. They acted irritated because I asked questions. They were rushing through the appointment, right? They talked over me. I waited an hour and I got 7 minutes with the doctor, right? Things like this. People are frustrated with the system, right? Um, and the ones I love the most, they work together, right? So they acted like I was stupid because I didn't understand the terminology, but then they acted like I was difficult because I did understand the terminology, right? Those 2 things, like, you can't win, right? So I understand the frustration. And I also understand the frustration with the doctors as well, because they have got so many regulations and so many things that they have to follow, and they have to, all there's so much, there really is. But I think part of I know the problem is the system, right? The system is broken as far as I'm concerned. Um, you call up, you have an issue. Now you've tried a few things to fix this problem and you don't know what's going on and you need a professional opinion, right? So you call a doctor because that's what we've been told to do. You call a doctor and you make an appointment and they make you wait 6 weeks to get an appointment because they're so busy, um, and then they tell you to come 15 minutes early. So you come 15 minutes early to the appointment, you sign in and you sit in the waiting room and you sit and you sit and you sit, right? And you're waiting and you're thinking, you're looking around, and all these things run through your head, right? You might be concerned about your health. You might be saying, "Oh, I could be doing so many other things right now that instead of sitting here doing nothing," right? You'd be looking around the waiting room going, "God, I hope these people don't have anything contagious that I'm going to catch." Like there's all these things that can run through your head, right? So then you finally they finally come and they call you, and you go in the back and they take your weight and they take your blood pressure and then they put you in another room and you sit again and you wait and you wait, and all these things keep running through your head, right? And you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and then finally someone comes in the room. Okay, no, it's not the doctor, not yet. So, what's going on today? So, you go through the whole explanation of what you're experiencing, what the problem is, why you're in there, and they're taking notes and they're nodding their head and they're asking questions, and you're giving all these responses. And you've now got this very clear picture that you have created for them, right, of what's going on with you. Medication lists, all kinds of things that you've given them, right? And then they leave. And you're still waiting, and you're waiting, and you're waiting. And then the doctor comes in if you're lucky enough to see a doctor, right? Many times now, I haven't seen a doctor in, I don't know, a long time. Um, I see the nurse practitioner, and I'm not absolutely not saying anything against the nurse practitioner. They are very knowledgeable people, but they're not the doctor that I paid to come and see, right? Anyway, so then they come in, and now you're at your appointment. And the first thing they ask is, "So what brought you in here today?" Which is the exact thing that you just answered, right? So now you've gotten all of these things out there, And they're looking, but they don't seem to be reading anything of all the things that you just explained, and they're asking questions that you've already explained, and now I personally get frustrated at this point, and now my brain is running in different directions, and now I'm forgetting to say certain things, right? All these things I had in my head, this is how it was gonna be, this is what I'm gonna tell them. When I'm doing it the second time around, I'm leaving things out, and then I'm worrying, am I leaving things out? Like, it's just a whole big thing. So it's like you don't know. Are they reading what the nurse wrote? Is it important? Did I miss something? What's going on? Right? All these different things. Anyway, so you kind of feel like you're being rushed through at that point. And then maybe, let's order some labs or let's try this medication. And that's the answer that they get. And then they're already working their way out the door. Right? So some of this is due to bad communication. Some doctors just aren't very good at communicating, and that's just a flat out thing. Some people aren't very good at communicating, right? But I think the majority of the problem is that there are certain insurance requirements, prior authorizations, documentation requirements, electronic records keeping things, productivity expectations, right? Administrative work, and they all consume the clinician's time. And all of these things keep them from being able to just come in and be a doctor, right? They've got there's a lot. There's just a lot. So your doctor could be frustrated with the system too, right? That doesn't excuse disrespect, but it can kind of change who the enemy is a little bit in our minds, right? It's not the doctor that's doing this, it's that they have got so many things going on. So many things have to be taken care of. And if they're not the doctor that owns the clinic, then they're expected to do things within certain time, right? They're only given X amount of time per appointment, and they have to try to cram it in there and fit it in there. So, like, the bigger the clinic, the harder it is to, butt up against that time. If you're just going to the old family doctor, he's got, only him, he's the one that owns the building and the clinic and the whole bit. It's a little different. They can spend a little more time with you. Um, but there's also the influence of the pharmaceutical companies, right? And I think we all have heard the phrase big pharma. But there's kickbacks, right? If you prescribe this, we give you a little bit of, incentives. They have a lot of stock in some of these things. So there could be a little bit of that and a little bit of corruption or financial greed involved in this whole thing. But also, an insurance company won't pay for a thing or a medicine unless you're diagnosed with a certain thing. And to get diagnosed with a certain thing, you have to be within a range of numbers on this chart for a thing, right? So now the doctors are kind of tied. Like, I think it might be this kind of thing here, but we have to get you the test before I can say that, right? And then there's always malpractice concerns. There's like so much, right? There's so much that doctors have to worry about. So, and I'm not trying to give them excuses, because I know that a lot of the stuff that we experience is straight up disrespect. Things that I've heard people say to me are straight up disrespect. Now, whether those are exact quotes or if they're just how it was heard in the moment, I don't know, because I wasn't there, right? But I have experienced myself disrespect flat out. So I know it happens. It's not like I'm saying you guys are lying. This is not what it is, right? And I'm not saying you're misinterpreting what they're saying either. Um, so I think part of the problem also is there's a lot of different things coming here together, but part of the problem also is that we have been taught to be patients. Okay. Our system, our whole upbringing for generations has been taught, if you feel bad, you go to the doctor, The doctor tells you what's wrong, and you do what the doctor says. Okay? Much of my younger years have were spent in this cycle. Okay? And much of my learned experience about things not to do were spent in this cycle, right? The doctor is the authority, the patient is the recipient. And that's how it is. You tell me what to do, I do the thing, right? And I'm supposed to feel better afterwards. I mean, that's supposed to be the end game here, right? Um, I think from what I'm seeing that doctors are actually trying to kind of move away from that, right? The whole medical establishment is sort of, kind of trying to move away from that. So I'm encouraged by this. Okay, they're starting to actually recommend a model where the patients are more involved in their care. Now, it's a new model and it's something that is not being adapted quickly or adopted quickly, but it is, I think, heading in the right direction. So I think there's some encouraging, future ahead in this. Your doctor knows medicine. Your doctor knows what he or she was taught in school. They know, names for body parts, and they know how whatever system they're working on, they specialize in, they know how that works, right? You're supposed to have a general practitioner who kind of oversees the whole body. And then you're sent out to specialists who work on the cardiovascular or the nervous system or whatever system they work in, right? Whatever their specialty is. Those people will say, oh, this is what's going on in this particular system. Send that back to your general practitioner who can then kind of oversee the whole care of everything that's going on. It doesn't always work that way, but that's kind of what the system is designed to do, right? Um, but you know how it feels to live inside your body 24/7, right? That should not be ignored because you're the one that's experiencing what's going on in your body. And when you bring that to someone and say, this is the experience, and they kind of wipe it away, right? You feel disrespected. You feel not listened to. You feel like nobody's paying attention to you. And you do this repeatedly. I know people who have gone to doctor after doctor after doctor with the same issues, right? Still not being diagnosed. Sometimes they are diagnosed and then they're misdiagnosed. No, it wasn't really this, it was that. Now, also, again, because I'm a Libra, I have this whole balance thing, right? Um, a lot of things can look like a lot of other things. So, you might fall into the category of this diagnosis when actually there's more going on and it's really this diagnosis, but they're kind of related, right? It's your whole body. Your body is all related, it's all one system. So, misdiagnoses, um, when you're misdiagnosed, it tends to be the end of the story, right? This is your diagnosis. Okay, go on with your life. Here you go. Take this pill. Okay. Um, it ends the curiosity. So that's kind of a problem, right? Because then we're no longer curious about what's going on. We're saying, oh, I'll just take this pill and I'll be better, right? Um, the problem is also another problem, taking the pill. We're taught that the pill makes things better, right? Some pills are essential. They're life-saving. They are necessary. I'm not saying don't take the pills. I'm not saying don't take your medications that you've been prescribed. Please be clear about this, okay? I'm not saying stop your meds. What I am saying is that many medications treat the symptoms, but not the cause, okay? When you have a diagnosis and then you are receiving something to treat the symptoms and the curiosity stops, that to me is just a formula for failure eventually, right? I no longer feel the symptoms, so I'm no longer worried about the thing, but the thing keeps getting worse because the original cause is still there. right? And then I have to then take more medications, or sometimes that medication causes problems and I have to take more medications to counteract that medication. And then suddenly I've got all these bottles of medication that I'm trying to take. Okay. Um, so I'm not saying don't take your meds. I am saying go ahead and take your meds. That's what they want you to do. I mean, try them, right? See how they work, but also stay curious about why. Okay, if they don't have a reason as to why the thing is happening, then sometimes you may want to dig deeper. Okay, you may want to push with them deeper. You may want to start doing things to take control of your health. Okay, um, things that you might notice that you can track and then bring to your doctor later to help them understand the problem, right? You notice things like what might make something worse or what might make something better, right? When did the symptoms start? Um, do they correlate with how much sleep you get or how much hydration or your stress levels or your foods or how active you are, um, menstrual and hormonal changes, the changes in your medication, right? It gets worse when I feel sick because I got the flu and I got really bad, and like different things, your bowel changes, your blood glucose, your blood pressure, all these different things. By the way, let's go back a couple to bowel. It is not normal, ladies. Ladies, I was told this all my life. It is not normal to not poop every day. Okay? It's not normal. It's not, "Oh, well, it's coming to be the time of the month, and so I'm constipated every time." Right? That's a symptom. That's a thing to report. Okay? It is not normal to not poop every day. Putting that out there. You should a couple times a day. And when everything's working well, you should a couple of times a day. Should poop a couple times a day. Anyway, okay. So, um, I think the best way to really kind of look at this or kind of approach this is not something's wrong with me, fix me. Okay. You can't, when we go to the doctor with the mindset of something's wrong, I need you to fix me, then we are opening ourselves up to a world of, whatever they decide, right? Do they have a full understanding? Maybe not, but they're going to try to fix you, you know? Um, it can make your medication that you receive a little bit, um, biased, I guess is the word I'm looking for, right? Because they may not have a full understanding of what's going on, and so they're going to give you something based on what they perceive. Your discussion with them needs to be thorough, okay? Um, when you start getting curious about your body, right? You don't have to be a doctor, you don't have to become a doctor, you don't have to get a medical degree, right? But you can start to understand, um, some of the basics of how things work, right? So if you're diabetic, I have that diabetes group, right? So if you're diabetic, then understanding how insulin works in the body and what factors affect it can really, really help a lot, right? Now, I can go to the doctor, they can give me metformin or insulin or whatever, right? And then if I don't understand what's going on, I'm just going to progressively get worse. And then later it's going to be more metformin or more insulin, or maybe it's metformin and insulin, right? It's these things that were going to be compiled because the root problem is not being addressed. So, from my own experience, I was diagnosed with diabetes, and I was never diagnosed with prediabetes. I was never diagnosed with insulin resistance before that. And so all of a sudden, the doctor called me up, or the nurse called me up and said, "Hey, the doctor says you're diabetic. We've called in a prescription for you to the pharmacy." That was the conversation. There's no go here, look at this information. No, would you like to come in and discuss? Do you have questions? Whatever, right? There was none of that. It was just, here you go, have a pill, go pick it up. So then I took that and I said, that's not how this is going to end. This is not what I want from me, right? I don't want to do that. I went to the pharmacy, I got the prescription, and I started taking it. However, I got curious and I needed to understand what was going on, why it was going on, and how I could work my way off of the medication. Okay. So there's the clear distinction. I'm doing what they asked me to do while working towards in a healthy way, hopefully, right? Working towards getting off that med. So that's what really sent me down this whole track of doing the research in diabetes and then understanding all these things as an herbalist, also putting that together with it and then writing the book. But it was a curiosity. It was I'm not going to accept this as the answer for this right now. Oh, yes, the diagnosis of diabetes is correct, right? I'm not saying that that was incorrect diagnosis. Yes, it's correct. However, I didn't have to accept just taking the pill and moving on and continuing to do everything the way I was doing it before. Okay. Because that leads to bigger and bigger and bigger problems. Okay. We're not going to get into the problems that happen with diabetes, but it's tragic. It's freaking tragic. And that's not how I wanted it to go. So, um, maybe you have high blood pressure, right? So what causes high blood pressure, right? Get curious. I have reflux. Well, you could take a medication or you could try to understand what reflux is, right? Oh, I have chronic inflammation. Well, you could take inflammation medicine or you can try to understand why the body is reacting that way, right? So it's about getting curious, okay? Um, to understand how the problem came about and if there's something you can do to try to reverse that problem. Because I'm going to tell you that in many, many instances of chronic illness, there are ways to reverse them. Okay. Or at least to get them under control. Always work with your doctor. Your doctor may not always be workable. Maybe the communication is impossible. Maybe you can't get that particular doctor to work with you, then find another doctor. But if you're told things like, well, this is fine, everything looks fine here, right? Then ask them, okay, what did you test? Right? What does this test mean? What do these results mean? What is there a lot of times now they have like patient portals where you can actually view your numbers, right? Look at those numbers. See what is abnormal. What does that mean? What is this? This is abnormal, this is abnormal, and this is abnormal. What does that mean in the overall picture, right? You may not know, but you can ask. And if you don't get a satisfying answer, there are other things you can do to get those answers and educate yourself. Okay. Um, so my my best, because I've used this twice now. Okay. My best suggestions are, and I said I've used it twice. I have used it twice to get off medication with my doctor's approvals. Okay. When I was first diagnosed with diabetes. I got curious. Why? Why is it happening? What happens? How does the body work? Blah, blah, blah. And then I started, well, actually, before I even understood, I tracked. I tracked everything. I got up in the morning. I took my fasting blood glucose. I took my blood pressure because it was a little high too. I weighed myself. I got one of those smart scales that tell you everything. You don't really need that. But I got one and I tracked every number from that too, right? I took my blood sugar before I ate. I wrote down the foods I ate. I took my blood sugar 1 hour after, 2 hours after, so I could see what those foods did to my blood sugar. And I could understand how those foods were affecting me, right? Now, I took the metformin and I was on it for about 5 days, and I became an out of control angry bitch. Like, it did not, it was a metformin Janumet combination, and I snapped at people. And you guys don't know me all that well, but I'm not a snapper. I'm not someone who bites people's heads off. I'm not that person in general. In general, I'm very easygoing, okay, very patient, very kind. But I was not on this medication. And I called the doctor and I said, hey, this isn't working for me. I have had a major mood change, right? I am angry, and this is not how I want it to be. I said, give me the opportunity to change this with diet because I'm learning and I think I can do this. And she said, okay, your numbers aren't so bad that we have to do the medication right now. Come see me in 3 months and then we'll retest and we'll see how things are, right? She said, you are diabetic. Your numbers are in the diabetic range, but let's see what we can do. I said, okay. So she told me I could go off the medication. So I did. And then my mood came back to normal and I was fine. But um but I was testing, I was tracking, I had this spreadsheet, right? Massive spreadsheet, my weight, my then I and at the end of the day, I would total up the calories and the proteins and the fats and the carbs and all of these things on this spreadsheet, how many steps per day I made, I took, how much exercise I did that day, and honestly, didn't exercise a whole lot, but it was all recorded, right? Honestly, and that's important too. Um, what else was in there? Oh, caffeine intake, water intake, how did I sleep, and what my mood was. So that pretty much covered everything that I could think of, right, for the day. And it was a little cumbersome. Taking all of the blood sugar that many times a day, it's a little cumbersome, right? But fortunately, I worked from home, so it wasn't like I had to do this at work. But even when I was out and about, if I would have something to eat, I would stop, pull over into a parking lot, take my medication or take my blood sugar, go do whatever the food, was, and then still check it. Pull over, stop, check it in the car. Um, so I did this religiously because I needed to understand what affected me, what was the impact, right? What made these things go up and down. Um, and so while I was doing that, I was also kind of understanding, oh, that spiked my sugar. I'm not going to eat that for a while, right? And I got this whole thing going where I ended up 3 months later going to the doctor, and she said, wow, your numbers are great. What did you do? And I brought out my spreadsheet and I said, here it is, right? And she looked through and she said, this is exactly what you needed to do. This is wonderful. I am so excited for you. And I said, okay. It was like, what? Doctor was excited for me. And she said, this is wonderful. She said, I can't tell you how many people come to my office and they just want me to give them a pill to fix things. They don't want to know anything about this stuff. They don't want to know about how they can help and how they can help their body heal and feel better. She said, I'm so excited. This is wonderful. So her whole mood, not mood, her whole persona was different based on the fact that she realized that I wanted to understand and I wanted to help myself get control, and I wasn't there to just get a pill and move on. Okay, so that's the other thing with doctors. They see things, they talk to people, they say, well, maybe you should do this, maybe you should lifestyle change. And people are like, I'm not interested in lifestyle changes. Let me just, go on. Just give me the pill, doc. They encounter that a lot because that's the system that we have become accustomed to. I'm the patient, you're the doctor, I'm sick, you give me something, I feel better, right? That's the generation after generation of that's what has been given to us at this point. We have been trained to do that. Okay. But um tracking. So we track everything, right? And we have it on an app, we have it on paper, in a notebook, in whatever works for you. I also published a health tracker that goes along with the Reversing Diabetes book, if that helps you. I have a health tracker, an app in the Herbs and Insulin Diabetes group that I created that you can use on your phone, whatever, right? Whatever works for you. I can make recommendations. Carb Manager is one that I use because you can just put the food in there and it gives you the information, the fat, the carbs, the calories, all that protein. So, but you can try like any way that works for you, just track it so that you have something you can bring to them and say, this is when I do this, this changes, right? This contributes, this helps, da da da. And it helps to give them a bigger picture of what's going on. So, when you go to your appointment, okay, the American Health whatever the system actually recommends that you make a list of between 2 and 5 questions that you can ask your doctor. Okay. um your If you come curious, if you come prepared, that can help in your appointment. Okay. Um, Now I've known a lot of nurses in my time, and many of them say that there are doctors out there that just think that they're God and you can't talk to them. Okay. But there are also some very good doctors out there who really want to help, but have their hands kind of tied by all the regulations and all the requirements and all the stuff. Right. And so they're kind of, they would love to talk to you. The good doctors would love to talk to you. Okay. If you have one of those doctors who just thinks he's God and you cannot ask questions and you cannot give opinions and you really cannot communicate, then find another doctor that you can communicate to. It may be even few and far between. And especially people who live in a remote area, it's harder to find doctors, right? But you have to be prepared. Okay. Know what you're dealing with, know who you're dealing with. So in the beginning, you can say, I have 3 concerns today, right? This is the most important one. And then these are the other 2, right? Um, can we decide what to work on today and what might need another appointment? So you're open, right? You go in there and you explain, this is what I need. I'm willing to discuss and I'm willing to be flexible, but this is the first thing I need, right? So, um, you bring that just a one-page cheat sheet with you, okay? Because when you get there, I know when I get there, I forget everything I was gonna say, right? It is okay to bring out a piece of paper and say, "Here's my questions that I have." All right. If it's not okay, if that doctor ridicules you because you have a piece of paper with questions on it, that's not the doctor for you. Okay. So at the top of the page, okay, let's kind of lay out the page. At the top of the page is the primary concern. Why am I here? Okay. When did it start? Or approximately when, right? What does it feel like? In your body, what does it feel like? And try to get descriptive. Doesn't need to be a long paragraph, just 2 or 3 sentences. But 2 or 3 sentences, what does it feel like? Okay. Any patterns that you've noticed, right? What improves it? What makes it worse? Um, any of the relevant measurements, bring your tracker. Okay. When I'm doing this, it gets better. When I'm doing this, it gets worse, whatever, right? And also bring the list of medications and supplements that you're taking. Okay. Um, the supplements matter too. And it's harder to talk to doctors about supplements because a lot of them don't understand them, but bring the list anyway, mostly because sometimes if they're gonna give you a prescription, they may say, "Hey, don't take this one with this prescription because it will negate it, it will make it work, whatever, right? So it is important for them to understand, right? Even though they don't understand what all of them do, if you go in there with, I take, I don't know, rhodiola, they may look at you like you've lost your mind, right? Like, what is that? It also might help to, I take rhodiola for this, just in case they have the question. But any medications and supplements. And then at the bottom is my three most important questions, right? So you come up with three questions that you really want answered in this, and that's your sheet. Okay. And you bring that to them and you have the conversation. Now, sometimes you're still going to come up with the doctors that are in that groove, right? They come in, they go, they say, and then they get out, right? That's what they do all day long. They come in, they do their thing, and then they get out. So you're going to have to stand up and say, I need you to answer these questions, right? You're not going to go in there passively. You're not going to go in there aggressively either, right? But you're going to go in a this is what I need from you mode. You are the client. You are the one who is paying for the visit or your insurance company on behalf of you, right? So you are the customer, right? And the customer may not always be right, but the customer is always right in a basic sense of the term, right? So you're going to go into this and you're going to say, this is what I need from you. And that doctor should at least try to understand what it is that you need. They may not give you exactly what you need, but they'll at least try. A good doctor will try to understand where you're coming from. Okay. Um, you are allowed to ask. You are allowed to ask questions, right? So if a doctor's in and he's like, okay, we're going to do this test, and you're going to say, what are you looking for? Okay. Um, what do you think this test will rule in or rule out? Right? What could happen depending on the results? Because you're going in with this mindset of there's something wrong with me, and they may be saying, I'm going to do this test. And then you go home and wait for 2 weeks with all these questions and all these worries and oh my god, am I going to die, right? I mean, like, it could get to spiral out of control. But if you're there and you say, okay, what exactly are you looking for in this test? What could this test rule in or rule out, right? And you find those questions, um, you'll have those answers when you're sitting at home waiting for your results. So it can help, but it also can give you maybe some place where you can kind of jump off to find more research, right? If they're prescribing a medication, ask what they're treating. I know it sounds weird, right? Ask what they're treating. If they haven't given you a diagnosis, what is this for? What are you trying to treat here? What do you expect the medication to do? How will we know whether it's working or not? How long do you expect me to take this? Okay. When I had AFib, my doctor was very clear that I would have to take a blood thinner for the rest of my life when he handed me that prescription. Actually, it was his intern that told me that. The doctor himself called in the prescription itself. Um, but the intern said for the rest of your life, and I went, whoa, what? I had one instance of AFib. Why? Why am I going to have to take blood thinner for the rest of my life? That seems like a really long time, right? And so he explained what AFib is and what it does, and that it can throw clots into the body. And sometimes you may not know you're in AFib. And so, we don't want it throwing clots. It could. It could. Right. And I said, I don't like that. because this is the only time I've had AFib. And then I had to talk about what was going on in my body before I went into AFib. And I had to think about because I was in the hospital, I had nothing better to do, right? So I'm thinking about what could have triggered this all of a sudden because my blood pressure's fine, my everything's fine, right? So I went through and looked at what could cause it. What are the possibilities? I thought about what was going on in my day, in my weeks before that, before leading up to AFib. So then when the doctor came in, I said, "Hey, let me ask you a question. Is it possible that this and this and this and this added together could have caused this AFib?" And he said, "Yeah, yeah, right?" I mean, and I was shocked when he said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I said, "Okay." So I created a perfect storm with my behavior that made this happen. So what if I don't do that anymore? And he said, "Well, it's possible that you might never have AFib again. It's a possibility." He said, "But I can't guarantee that." I said, "I'm not looking for a guarantee. I'm just saying, is it possible?" And I said, "I don't want to take this medication for the rest of my life." And he said, "Oh, I really recommend that you do because blah, blah, blah." Right. And I said, "But what if I don't go into AFib again? Ever?" I really abused my body, really did. And I'm convinced this is why. And he said, "Okay, all right." He said, "I'm going to send you home with this medication. Come see me, and then we'll do a heart monitor, and you'll wear that for 15 days. And I want you to go for a sleep study." "Okay." He said, and I asked him why the sleep study. He said, "Because if it's sleep apnea, that can cause AFib. So we want to find out if you have that." Right. So I agreed. I agreed to go to the sleep study. I agreed to take the medication. I agreed to come to his appointment. I did all these things. I went to the appointment. They gave me the heart monitor. I wore the heart monitor. I did all the things they asked me to do, right? While making sure that I was no longer creating that perfect storm to make sure that I would not do that, right? Now, I wasn't going over the top in restricting anything because I didn't want it to have false readings on the heart monitor, right? I wanted to have a true, this is how I'm going to live my life. Let's make sure it's not, right? And then so eventually I did all the things and I kept doing it. And when I went back to them and I had the tracking and all the information, and they did the monitor and they did the sleep study, and then they said, "Okay, if you want to come off the medication, you are no longer in AFib. You have not had any of the symptoms of the episodes. Um, and your sleep study is fine, and if you would like to come off the medication, then it's possible that it's safe that you could do that." Right? Now, they could not say, "Yeah, go ahead," flat out, because then it leaves them for, open for I have no word, but it begins with an M, and it's a lawsuit. I know this word. Anyway, and it leaves them possibly being liable, right? Um, Malpractice. So, but he did say, "I believe that it would be okay for you to do that. However, I would like you to keep one bottle, and if you have any symptoms of AFib, wear your eye my iWatch that says AFib, right? Wear your iWatch, and if you have any symptoms, start taking that blood thinner." Okay, I can agree with that, right? So I worked with him doing what he asked me to do, but having a goal of coming off of the medication. Okay. Um, and that worked out well. It worked out well when I did it with diabetes too, right? So I'm just trying to give you a couple of examples of things that did work out well. Now, I'm not going to say that every single time you want to come off medication that it's a good idea, but there are cases when you can, And there are cases when the doctor can support you as well. You can work together to make this happen. Okay. And you can work together to find out what's going on in your body to understand it more. If you come at it more of a, I'm curious and I need to, explore this further with you, they are going to be much more adaptable and much easier to work with if they're the kind of doctor that can do that, that will do that, right? So, it's okay for you to say things like, I don't understand what that means, right? They should not ridicule you for saying, I don't understand what that means. If you have a doctor who ridicules you because you don't understand, then perhaps you need a new doctor. Okay, if you are clear and you are asking and curious questions and they are mentally or emotionally abusing you, get out of that relationship, just like any other relationship. Okay. Um, what I also could use, right, is like, could you explain that in a regular English or more simple language, right? Or let me repeat this back to you to make sure that I understand. Blah, blah, blah. Here's the explanation. Is that correct? Okay. You're trying to communicate, trying to have a conversation. All conversation roles apply here, right? The honesty, the open, the you're talking to each other like an equal. They are not above you. You are equals in this partnership. And that's what's really important to understand and to make them understand that you are partnering with them, right? You're not asking them to fix you. You are partnering with them to understand what's going on. All right. So, a lot of times, people, especially in my generation or earlier, like older people, they feel like if they question the doctor, they're being difficult. There are some doctors that will make you think you're difficult because you question them. Again, this is an abusive relationship. Get out of it and move to the next one. Okay. Questioning, not challenging, right? You're questioning in a curious way. You're not telling them that they don't know what they're talking about. Okay. Um, I'm not comfortable deciding this yet. I need to understand this better. Okay. That's okay to say. It is. What would happen if we monitored this for 3 months before I start the medication? Or what would happen, right? Get curious. It's a curious question. And it's okay to ask those things, right? And then they might come back and say, I really don't recommend waiting. Here's why. Then you have a better understanding of why you shouldn't wait. But then you can ask, is there a way that I could, right, after I do this, while I'm doing this, could we do something else so that I don't have to do this forever? Whatever, right? Um, and then you can work a negotiation out on what you can do and um, what is healthy to do, right? You don't want to just jump out there and say, I'm not doing what you're telling me to do. And you really don't want to just not do it. Okay. Um, when I went in for my last appointment with the cardiologist, I was determined that I was going to have to say to them, right? What if something came up? Right? Then I was going to have to say, look, I'm going off this medication. Help me do it in a healthy way or in a not dangerous way. Right? Because I didn't want to be on it. But then I thought, okay, look, if they decided through all this testing that I still needed to be on it, then I would have to really think about it. Right? Maybe I do need to be on it. I'm just going to have to think about the whole concept and be a little bit more open. Right? But because I was willing to work with them, because I got curious, because I was able to have the conversations with them, is this possible that this is what caused it, right? Then it opened up the possibility of me not having to take that medication. Um, don't just stop your medication suddenly. Anyone, don't stop any medication, just stopping it, right? If you are prescribed an antibiotic, I'm going to say this so many times. If you are prescribed an antibiotic, take it all the way through. Take the entire thing. Don't save some for later. Don't say, I'm feeling better and I can stop now. An antibiotic is necessary even after you're feeling better to finish killing off the bad bacteria that's in your body doing the things that it's doing. Okay. So, number one, if you start an antibiotic, finish it. Because if you don't, it will kill off some of the bacteria. Those bacteria that are remaining and still alive will understand how that medication works, and they will communicate it to the other bacteria, and then that antibiotic will no longer work. This is how we get super bugs. Okay. These super bugs that can't be killed by antibiotics. So there's a whole big long thing about this. But anyway, bacteria can talk to each other through networks. Okay. If one bacteria over here learns something, it passes it on to the others. Every bacteria that they meet along the way, they pass on that information together so that they all understand what's out there trying to kill them. Okay. And that's very simple terms for what goes on, but that is the basic idea behind it. Okay. So anyway, so don't stop medication. And I got on a sidetrack there with the antibiotics, but that's a whole thing. So don't stop any prescribed medications suddenly. Some of them are dangerous to stop. Okay. So make sure that if you are going to come off of something, you're doing it in a regulated way if that needs to be done, right? They taper you off or whatever it is that needs to be done. Make sure that that doctor knows that you're going off of it and why you're going off of it and that you can go off of it safely. Okay. So, um, sometimes, like I said, you just need a different doctor. You've been to this guy for the past 30 years. You feel like he knows you, right? But there's a difference between my doctor disagrees with me and my doctor refused to listen to me. Okay. If he disagrees with you, that's not the reason to go find another doctor necessarily. Okay. Yes, second opinion is always good, right? But if he refuses to listen to you, if it becomes a ridiculing kind of a thing, right? If there is contempt in the conversation, if he's refusing to explain anything, if he's refusing to answer reasonable questions, right? Then you probably just need to go find another doctor because these are things that I mean, really, like you don't need emotional abuse from your doctor, right? You need a partnership. You need to have a your symptoms aren't being dismissed necessarily without investigating them, or you don't need to be afraid to ask questions. Okay, so sometimes I mean, doctors are human, right? And sometimes the relationship is just a bad fit. It doesn't mean the doctor doesn't know what he's talking about. It's just you're not able to communicate with him, and that's fine. Okay. Some of us are more forceful in our communication, and some of us are more timid in our communication. And we need to find somebody who can communicate with us, right? Um, some doctors are wonderful communicators, but they're mediocre at diagnosing things, right? Um, some doctors specialize in exactly what you need, and that's where you go, right? Because that's the thing that they specialize in. Sometimes you got to deal with their personality a little bit. Um, some don't, though, right? If you need a specialist, you have, this particular diagnosis in a very specific thing, and this is the guy to go to, then you deal with his ego. Um, but you still try to talk to him or her, um, and try to communicate as best you can with that person, right? Um, just stop thinking of yourself as a passenger in your healthcare. Okay. A lot of people just feel like they're just, oh, floating, right? It's, I don't know anything about this, so I'm just going to listen to you. Try to stop doing that. You can take control of your health. Okay. Even if it's something that you will have to have medication or treatments or whatever for the rest of your life, you can still take control of that care. You can still understand what's happening, and you can possibly influence your outcome by making some changes and educating yourself. Okay. You go to the doctor, you bring your history, your tracking, your observations, you bring your values, right? I don't want to take medication for the rest of my life. So I go there and I let them know I would prefer to do something natural. I would prefer to learn about the thing and figure out how to do it in a natural way. Okay. And that gives them a parameter. I'm working within this parameter. However, you also need to let them know that you're going to be flexible. Okay. Because I also want to live. Right. So I want to do it naturally. But if that's not going to help me live, then let's go with this. But be open and be a partner in your healthcare. Okay. Learn about your body, learn how to pay attention to your body, nurturing your body absolutely helps. It's, I'm terrible at it. I am terrible at it. I've gotten so much better than I used to be. I used to ignore it all the time, right? Just ignore, push through the pain. I can do this. I'm strong. I need to get things done. I'm going to ignore everything that's going on, right? Um, we need to learn to nurture and care for and communicate with our bodies so we know when things are getting out of control. Okay. Pay attention to it. Keep records. Ask questions, but get curious. Just get curious. That is the best advice I can give you. Okay. Bring the tracking. Now, I've had some people say also, if I do this and I understand what they're talking about and I bring information and I bring questions, I feel like a hypochondriac. They make me feel like a hypochondriac. They look at me like I'm a hypochondriac. And one person actually told me that they were given some kind of a slang term called Dr. Google. Okay. That's not a doctor that you want to deal with if they're going to say that you're Dr. Google. Okay. Because they have turned off their curiosity and they no longer give a shit, flat out. Okay. If you're being labeled that kind of a thing because you are coming at them curiously asking questions and that kind of thing, then that's not the doctor for you. Um, find another one. Just find another one. So you're going to become an active participant in your healthcare. You're going to prepare for your doctor's appointments with lists, questions, right? The one pager. Um, you go back and rewind this video and go through that one pager again. Hello, Kat. How are you? Um, then we're going to talk about, maybe we might even talk about later on, like lab work, understanding lab work, that kind of thing. Um, I I know people are putting their lab work into ChatGPT, and that kind of thing to see, right? And it's very helpful. It gives really helpful information. Just don't put your name in there, right? Say, I have a client with this, right? Whatever. A friend who had these numbers. Just don't make it like personal identifying information that you're putting into AI, is all I'm asking. But understanding your lab work, what things can mean, right? What they can go to, what are the numbers that we're looking for, that kind of thing. We might maybe talk about that later some more too. Um, when your doctor wants to prescribe something, ask questions. What are the benefits versus the side effects? Brain. What are the benefits versus the side effects, right? What should I look out for? It's not your pharmacist's job to do this, although they are supposed to be doing this too, and that doesn't really happen much. They say, "Do you have any questions?" And almost everybody says, "No, I don't have any questions." Even if you do, right? Just no. I'll just read the paper, and then I won't read the paper when I get home, and I'm just going to take this medication. But ask the questions, right? What are things I should be looking for that is showing me that it's helping or that it's not, that it's causing problems, right? What are the risks? Um, and then become a body detective. Okay. Track everything you can think of. Um, Also, if someone says it's stress, right? Sometimes they say to you, it's stress, or they try to give you a medication for anxiety. This does not mean, oh, it's just all in your head and we're ignoring you. Okay, that does not necessarily mean that. Sometimes, yes. But for the most part, if they're saying it's stress, they could really mean that it's stress causing these things in your body. That does not mean it's in your head. Okay. Stress, the nervous system controls everything in the human body. It regulates all the systems, or like it's an overseer of all of all the stuff that's going on, right? It helps to say, okay, this is happening here. You go over there and do that. You go over here and do this, right? I mean, the nervous system is the active part of the body that just like looks over everything and tells what to do. Um, if you're stressed out, your body goes into chemical changes that are adapted naturally as part of, how the body is supposed to work. It's supposed to shut down your digestion. It's supposed to shut down a lot of the not the unnecessary, but the secondary systems so that you can focus on getting out of a situation. Okay. So if you're having digestive problems and they say it could be related to stress, they really mean that because your nervous system is shutting down your digestive system because it thinks it needs to be, get into a safe place, run away from the tiger in the jungle. All of its things are going into sustaining you and making you able to deal with a situation, and then when you feel safe again, then everything can restore, right? But if the nervous system never gets a chance to feel safe, then those things don't ever get restored. So, my point, if they say it's stress, it might just be stress. Okay. If they say, I've never heard a doctor call somebody a hypochondriac to their face. Okay. If you feel like that's what they're saying, then I want you to take a step back and see how you're acting first. Okay. How are you acting in the situation? Are you approaching them in a conversational way? Are you curious? Are you talking to them like a curious person who's trying to take control of their health? Or are you approaching them in a way of fix me, fix me, fix me? I'm not willing to take any responsibility for my health, right? If, hello, if that just threw me off. So we look at ourselves, we look at how we're approaching it, right? If we're saying, yeah, I'm approaching this in a curious manner. I'm really trying to get this, figured out, and you're not getting that kind of equal partnership back, then that's a problem. Okay. If you aren't being heard, they refuse to hear you, find another doctor. If you aren't being heard, maybe you need to be clearer before you go find another doctor. Just consider the possibility. Okay. But if you're bringing all this stuff to the appointments and they're just not looking at them, they don't care, they're not doing, then, find somebody else. Um, you do not need to place 100% of your trust in your doctor. This is not how this works. Okay. You don't put 100% of your trust in anyone. And I'm not saying that in a cynical manner. I'm saying that we take control of our life. It's our life. We take control of our life. We take our power, right? We control what goes on. Now, we don't control everything, okay? But we do, control our emotions. We do control our thought process, and we can take control of our health care so that we can nourish our body and so that we can care for ourselves while getting information, knowledge, and suggestions, diagnostics, things like that, taking part of the technology that's available to our doctors, right? Excellent diagnostic machines, lab work, all these different things, the knowledge that they have. These are very good resources. So I'm not ever going to tell you not to go to a doctor, but I am going to say that we can work with them. Okay. Get yourself a holistic doctor, get yourself an herbalist, have all of them work together. This is actually happening now in the medical field. Herbalists are working with doctors together. Not all of them, but it can be done. There are more and more holistic doctors out there, and they understand that the body is a whole system, right? And it is not only a whole physical system, but emotional, spiritual, physical, all of it have to do together, right? Mind, body, spirit, that it does all have to relate together. Um, Anyway, I've probably talked long enough about this. This is basically what I wanted to do. We may still have the bitch session that we were going to start the Meaningful Monday out with, so that we can really kind of, come together and talk about the things that we're having a problem with, the issues that we're facing, and see if there are other things that we can maybe do to try to get these together. But I also wanted to make sure that, we're all looking at not just what the doctor's not doing, but we're also looking at what maybe we could do better to make the communication a little bit, you know, more back and forth. Um, yeah. So, so that's where I stand. That's where we are. I don't even know how long this went. So hopefully it wasn't too long and dragged out. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching.